where you deserve to be. On iRadio, your eye on South Sudan.
For information and entertainment, stay tuned to iRadio, your eye on South Sudan.
Sounds of the Week on iRadio.
أنا بعمل welcome back to our president. الوزير عادل والمسؤولين لما نشوف الرئيس وما في ما بنوم ما بيزرع مشغول بتوع ولا بيرفع يا صار ماشي مو بجماعي وياتو لما نشوف جاي مطار جاري ويج ماشين ما بنتي ولا أنا نشوفه في الوزراء بتوعه هاي وزير كلي يجيو إنجازات بتوعه اللي هو عمل ورا ودينا متابعين كلام ده أقول نمشي وين بلد بتاعنا نمشي وين تاني ناس جارين فوقه ناس موت كل يوم وناس جلو أنا داري ده دي كده في جاي كده ولا دلوقتي ديجريات يا أخوان إذا رأيت ديجري في ما بقابو ليه ما في ديجري ما كل دول نام كل دول يعمل الفلان بتاعه كل دول ده يشوف المسألة بتاعه وين المسألة بتاع جامعة ما في يعني للمسؤولين ديل لما نشوف كلام وجه كلام كل دول يتعبوا ويسلموها ولا إني ده ما عمل أي حاجة.
Sounds of the Week on iRadio, your eye on South Sudan. Live from Juba, on air and online.
This is iRadio News.
Hello, good afternoon. This is iRadio News. First, here are the headlines. The Ministry of General Education and Instruction, with funding from Global Partnership for Education, has launched a $58 million project to expand access to quality and inclusive education, especially for girls and marginalized groups. Digital connectivity across South Sudan has significantly risen, with internet users increasing from 1.3 million in 2024 to 1.9 million in 2025, and mobile phone users growing from 3.97 million to 4.47 million over the same period. An activist, Jacqueline Nasiwa, has called on South Sudan's leadership to urgently audit all revenue collections and implement transparent financial practices to mitigate the worsening economic crisis. These stories and more coming to you in this news bulletin with me, Baria Johnson, and now the news in detail. The Ministry of General Education and Instruction, with funding from Global Partnership for Education, has launched a $58 million project to expand access to quality and inclusive education, especially for girls and marginalized groups. The 4-year project aims to transform basic education in the country. The program will directly benefit over 300,000 learners and reach an additional 600,000 indirectly across 20 counties, including some of the most affected areas such as Jonglei, Lakes and the Greater Pibor Administrative Area. Being implemented by the Ministry of General Education in partnership with the UN Children Agency UNICEF and other partners, the project pulls together 3 key funding streams under one integrated government-led program. This include the Transformation Grant, Girls Education Accelerator and System Capacity Grant. Through the System Transformation Grant, 250,000 children, half of them girls, will get support, including 3,000 children with disabilities and 1,120 from pastoralist communities. About 7,300 teachers will also benefit from the initiative. The Girls Education Accelerator will help 33,000 girls, 2,000 children with disabilities, 1,650 teachers, and 29,500 boys through special programs like accelerated learning and sexuality education. Dr. Kuyuk Abol Kuyuk, Minister of General Education and Instruction, said, and I quote, This funding from Global Partnership for Education will provide life-saving educational opportunities for hundreds of thousands of crisis-affected girls and boys across the country. We call on global leaders to scale up support to sustain this momentum. End quote. Meanwhile, UNICEF representative Obia Ochiang said, boys and especially girls have been shortchanged for too long, with no clear path to education. As Nelson Mandela said, education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. End quote. The system capacity grant will strengthen how education policies are made, planned and delivered across the country. According to reports from UNICEF, as of 2025, an estimated 2.8 million school-aged children are not attending school, representing over 70% of the population in that age group. Digital connectivity across South Sudan has significantly risen, with internet users increasing from 1.3 million in 2024 to 1.9 million in 2025, and mobile phone users growing from 3.97 million to 4.47 million over the same period. That's according to the National Communications Authority. In a Facebook post titled Timeline of South Sudan Tech and ICT, the Communication Authority said internet penetration has increased from 12% to 15.7% within just 1 year. The government attributes this advancement to the launch of the National Broadband Roadmap, the digital government strategy, and the partnership with Starlink, which aimed to expanding rural connectivity. To enhance digital economy, the Bank of South Sudan launched what it termed as National Instant Payment System in March 2025. Additionally, in June, the government approved a $9 million budget for the design of a national fiber network to enhance nationwide internet access. These developments, according to the Ministry of Information, will also highlight the country's historical milestones in communications. According to the ministry, South Sudan's first postal service was established in Kodok, then Fashoda, in 1877. At the time, communication relied mainly on copper-wired poles and telephone exchanges in towns like Juba, Malakal, and Wau. Wireless radio transmitters were later introduced in Bor, Juba, and El Fashir. From the 1950s to the early 2000s, communications were largely limited to high-frequency radio links and outdated telephone systems. A major development came on May 25, 1977, when the government inaugurated an 11-meter satellite antenna at Nyakuron Earth Station, enabling international calls to Khartoum and beyond. For the Communication Authority, the recent rise in internet penetration and mobile usage is a steady progress in South Sudan's journey toward digital inclusion. Activist Jacqueline Nasiwa has called on South Sudan's leadership to urgently audit all revenue collections and implement transparent financial practices to mitigate the worsening economic crisis. Speaking to iRadio this afternoon, she said that strengthening accountability is now more crucial than ever, especially in light of drastic global aid reductions linked to U.S. foreign policy shifts under President Donald Trump. Her remarks came amid alarming projections that more than 14 million people could face premature death by 2030 due to Trump-era decision to significantly cut U.S. funding for international humanitarian programs. In March, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed that over 80% of all programs under the U.S. Agency for International Development had been cancelled. According to research published in the Lancet Medical Journal, approximately one-third of those projected to die prematurely are children across 133 countries. This is what Jacqueline Nasiwa had to say.
Currently, South Sudan is battling with the economic crisis. Since our independence, we have not been stable in terms of both political stability and also economic stability. And as you know, our economy depended a lot on the oil which flows through Sudan. And now with the crisis in Sudan, it has affected our oil flow multiple times. And that gives the huge gap in terms of the revenue generated from the oil that could support in terms of the gaps created by the US pulling out. However, I'll also say that this is a lesson for the government to put up proper accountability and transparent processes for the utilization and usage of this money, which is not necessarily the oil money, but also other non-oil revenue which is generated.
Nasiwa stressed that South Sudanese citizens deserve to see the impact of the taxes they pay. She warned that pullback of U.S. aid is part of a broader trend, with other countries and organizations also scaling back their commitments.
We pay taxes monthly to the government, and we want to see that the taxes that we pay is reflected in the services that we get and the people of South Sudan get. So that means we need also to do an audit of the revenue collected. We have had money collected, but we are also not seeing the money trickling down to service delivery. So this is a call for the government now to start looking at the resources which are available and make sure that these resources cover up the gap which is created by USA pulling out. And by the way, it could not be USA pulling out. Globally, we have seen also the challenges. We have seen funding cuts from other countries and organizations as well. So that means that where there is a gap left, the government has to come in handy and put strict measures in terms of the exploration of our resources and also their utilization.
You are listening to iRadio Afternoon News. South Sudan's permanent representative to the United Nations says the country is cautious in its approach to external borrowing in light of debt sustainability and concerns. Ambassador Cecilia Adut Munyok made the remarks at the 4-day international conference on financing for development due to conclude today in Seville, Spain. She said South Sudan prioritizes conceptual financing and grants that address infrastructure and human capital gaps. However, Ambassador Adut called on the international community to move toward a renewed global financial support grounded in equality, flexibility and mutual accountability. The diplomat reaffirms the government's commitment to working with the international partners to build a resilient, inclusive and sustainable economic system that leaves no country behind.
I'm here on behalf of His Excellency President Salva Kiir Mayardit. Of course, challenges persist, and the UN Convention on Tax Cooperation is a welcome step in leveraging the global tax playing field. Number 2, public debt and access to consensual finance. South Sudan has maintained a cautious approach to external borrowing in the light of debt sustainability and concerns. However, consensual finances and grants remain essential to closing our infrastructure and human capital gaps. Financing for development is not just about increasing the volume. It's about ensuring the right type of financing at the right time for the right priorities. South Sudan stands ready to work with the international partners to build resilience, inclusivity, sustainable economic system that leaves no country behind. We urge this conference to go beyond affirmation and deliver a renewed global financial compact rooted in equality, flexibility, and mutual accountability.
And finally, the Executive Director of the Community Empowerment for Progress Organization, Edmund Yakani, has appealed to President Salva Kiir to address key national concerns during the upcoming Independence Day on July 9th. In an interview with iRadio, Yakani welcomed President Kiir back to the country following a 10-day official visit to the United Arab Emirates. However, as South Sudan approaches its 14th independence anniversary, he urges the president to announce the reopening of the National Parliament, which has been delayed for too long, and prioritize the long-pending legislative agenda. These include the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Bill, the Gender-Based Violence Bill, and the Family Law. Yakani said that these laws are essential for protecting vulnerable population and promoting justice. He further urged the president to commit to the country's comprehensive action plan for peace and reform.
I would like to take this opportunity to welcome His Excellency President back home after 10 days of official visit to UAE. As a civil society activist, I would like to take this opportunity to bring to you some concerns of high interest for the common interest of the citizens of South Sudan. As we are heading towards the commemoration of our Independence Day in the next few days on the 9th of July, Your Excellency President, we wish to hear from your Independence Day address information on the reopening of the parliament after the long recess, the bill on the rights of persons with disability, the bill on gender-based violence in the country, the bill on family law, and also, Your Excellency President, I would like to urge your leadership to speak to the country commitment towards the action plan for comprehensive.
Yakani also voiced concerns related to the upcoming elections, stressing the need for the timely release of the electoral calendar, advocate and consistent funding for the National Elections Commission, progress in the constitution-making process, and the completion of the population census. He also called for the unification of the armed forces as a foundation for a peaceful and credible electoral process.
The following are the concerns associated with the election. Timely release of electoral calendar. That's really things associated with adequate and timely funding of the National Election Commission and matters of constitutional making process and population census that are linked to the elections, and also commitment for the implementation of the unification of the forces as factors that contribute. We are aware that political parties that are signatory to other access have a challenge, but if we can come together as a citizen and use dialogue as an instrument of finding a middle ground, we will succeed, because we have seen with the referendum in 2011, and Your Excellency President, we know you for wisdom, like when the country was under friction over the issue of the number of states and you revoked to 10 states and the whole country.
You are listening to iRadio Afternoon News, and now to the regional and international news with my colleague Nidal Golda.
Good afternoon and welcome to the stories making headlines in Africa and beyond. Nigeria's two main opposition leaders have joined a new political party to challenge President Bola Tinubu and his ruling party in the next election. Atiku Abubakar and Peter Obi have chosen the African Democratic Congress as their new political home after breaking away from their respective parties, the People's Democratic Party and the Labour Party. This is one of the biggest shakeups in Nigerian politics since the end of military rule in 1999. Elsewhere, at least 5 people have died and dozens are missing after a ferry sank off Indonesia's tourist island of Bali, rescuers say. The boat was carrying 53 passengers and 12 crew members when it sank at 11:20 local time on Wednesday while on its way to Bali from the eastern coast of Java Island. The Surabaya office of the National Search and Rescue Agency said 31 survivors have been rescued, the agency says, as the search continues. Finally, President Donald Trump said on Wednesday that the U.S. will charge 20% tariffs on imports from Vietnam under a new trade deal reached during last-minute negotiations. Products sent from Vietnam to the U.S. had faced a 46% levy, which was set to go into effect next week as part of Trump's reciprocal tariffs announced in April. Dozens of economies, including the European Union and Japan, are still scrambling to their own deals with the U.S. before the planned increases. That's all from the stories making headlines in Africa and the international arena, and now back to you, my colleague Baria Johnson in the studio.
Thank you, Golda. Now to the sports news with Emmanuel Joseph Akile.
Liverpool forward Diogo Jota, aged 28, has died with brother Andre Silva in the accident which took place in the Spanish province of Zamora. The 26-year-old was also a professional footballer with Portuguese second-tier club Penafiel. The Guardian Civil has told BBC Sport that Jota and his brother died at about 12:30 local time on Thursday. They said that their car, a Lamborghini, left the road due to a tire blowout while overtaking another vehicle and then caught fire. Jota married his long-term partner Ruti Cardoso, with whom he has 3 children just last month. In boxing, former world heavyweight champion Tyson Fury will come out of retirement in 2026. Saudi boxing power broker Turki Al-Sheikh appeared to claim on Wednesday. Tyson, 36, retired from boxing in January after losing a title fight rematch with Alexander Usyk by unanimous decision the previous month. Al-Sheikh said in a post on X, "I talked with him and I have his word to have him in Riyadh season in 2026. We have a rabbit to hunt." The Ukrainian won their first encounter in May 2024 by a split decision to become the heavyweight division's first undisputed four-belt champion. And finally, Carlo Alcaraz spoiled Oliver Trevet's Wimbledon adventure as the defending champion moved into the third round with a 6-1, 6-4 and 6-4 over the British amateur, while last year's runner-up Jasmine Paolini became the latest star to crash out on Wednesday. The record-breaking number of seeds crashed out at the All England Club in the first round, but Alcaraz and women's world number one Aryna Sabalenka avoided shocks on center court. Second-seeded Alcaraz needed 2 hours and 17 minutes to subdue world number 733 Tavet, who produced flashes of his emerging talent to delight the partisan crowd. That's all from the world of sports, and back to you, Baria Johnson.
Thank you, Akile. This is iRadio News, and to end this bulletin, here are the headlines once again. The Ministry of General Education and Instruction, with funding from Global Partnership for Education, has launched a $58 million project to expand access to quality and inclusive education, especially for girls and marginalized groups. Digital connectivity across South Sudan has significantly risen, with internet users increasing from 1.3 million in 2024 to 1.9 million in 2025, and mobile phone users growing from 3.97 million to 4.47 million over the same period. An activist, Jacqueline Nasiwa, has called on South Sudan's leadership to urgently audit all revenue collections and implement transparent financial practices to mitigate the worsening economic crisis. That's the end of iRadio Afternoon News. If there is a story or an event you would like iRadio to cover or report about, please send us a text message on +211 925 287870. It's also our WhatsApp number. Follow us on X at iRadio Juba, like our Facebook page, iRadio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at iRadio South Sudan. You can also visit our website and listen to us online at www.iradio.org. Stay tuned for the news in Arabic at 12:30. I am Baria Johnson. Thank you for listening.